This is the story of a video game prototype that its creators not only had to stop working on, but were forced to ban from their own studio because of the psychological effect it was having on those who played it. And we've got a copy of it right here on my kitchen table. Is that a good idea? Now, don't be disarmed by the fact that this thing is played on paper or that it looks incredibly simple. This is a game that's won or lost largely based on how well you can manipulate other players. Yes, there are action points and health, but really the true currency of this game is trust.
And even though there were still people who were enjoying it and were deeply invested in it, it was definitely didn't feel like it was worth proceeding with, at the cost of some people who were definitely feeling pretty unhappy with the whole experience.
That was Luke Muscat, one of two designers who worked on this thing at Halfbrick Studios in Brisbane, Australia, almost a decade ago. You might know that team already as the creators of games like Fruit Ninja and Jetpack Joyride. It was, and still is, primarily a studio that makes mobile games, and in 2012, they were trying to come up with something new. After playing around with several concepts, Muscat and another designer called Joe Gatling found themselves interested in the idea of something that you wouldn't just play, but that you'd find yourself obsessing over and discussing outside of the game itself.
Around that time, Words with Friends had just taken over the world, and literally everyone was playing it all the time. And so something that everyone could play was definitely something that was on my mind.
Not wanting to commit too many resources to a prototype that might not go anywhere, the pair decided to play test it on paper first and wrangle as many volunteers as they could from around the office. An email was sent out saying something along the lines of, "Hey, would you like to test a new game? It's going to take a couple of weeks to complete, probably, but it shouldn't require more than a few minutes of your time each day. If you're interested, we're going to be playing in the boardroom with the glass walls. Cheers very much, Luke and Joe, kiss." I don't actually know if they added a kiss. The point is, they sent out an email and 16 people signed up, plus Joe. That makes 17, which is quite a few more than the pair had been expecting. Which is actually where some of the issues may have stemmed from now that I think about it, but we'll get into that. This game is called Tank Tactics, sometimes Tank Turn Tactics, and this is how it worked. Each of the 17 players were assigned a tank on the board at random, represented by one of these squares, and there were a couple of stats to think about too. Hit points, everyone starts with 3 of those. If you lose all 3, you're dead, and range, that's how many tiles away your tank can shoot. Players also have a number of action points at their disposal, and they can use these points to either shoot, move, or upgrade the range of their tank. If you're close enough to another player and you do use an action point to shoot, you will hit them, and in doing so, remove exactly 1 of their hit points. The last player standing wins the game. The end. Which, if I'm honest, sounds incredibly straightforward, perhaps even a tad boring. Let's see if I can change your mind on that. How do players receive action points, you may be wondering? Well, they receive exactly 1 per day from Muscat himself, who would wander around the office and hand them out like terrible little candies. And here's the rule that ultimately changes everything. Let's say you've got your tank here and there's another one right there, and you've got a single action point. Now you're in range, ready to attack them if you wanted to, but instead of doing that, you could choose to fire over your action point and give it to them. Meaning that let's say there's a player here with 2 action points and they want to kill this player who's got 3 health. They can potentially convince their other neighbor to give them an action point, and then bam, 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 they can immediately kill this player in 1 brutal attack. Now you might be thinking, okay, I see where this is going. The game kicks off and players start forming little groups all over the map, maybe a couple over here, 3 down in this corner, another 4 over here somewhere, and the stress of the game comes in the fact that these gangs, over a long period of time, rise up and then collapse amongst themselves. And sort of, but no, also not really. The game started way more explosively than that.
In my head, I had thought no one would do anything major for a couple of days because I'd really thought it would play out like a game of chicken. Like people would sit there amassing action points, and there would be some cost and some benefit to being an early mover in the game. And then, it was literally a few hours after, and I think 3 players were dead already, and which just blew me away. I had absolutely no idea how it was possible. And what it ended up being was Very quickly, everyone mobilized and created this huge faction of 12 or so players. And everyone traded their points around to a single player who was able to then, take 12 actions, which include 9 shots and 3 moves. And so 3 people were wiped out before they'd even really gone down to look at the room.
Just take a moment to think about the kind of promises that must have been made in order to get all 12 of those players to work together in unison, in a game in which everyone knows only one player is going to win. There's no guarantee as you hand over your stack of action points to the next person that they're actually going to do what they said they were going to do. And also, what's it like being one of the 5 players not invited to the party, or worse, the 3 that got knocked out before they got to make a single action? Although this daisy chaining of action points did catch the designers by surprise, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it showed, if anything, that players were really engaging with Tank Tactics, that they wanted to push at the boundaries of its rule set and try and understand it, which suggests a good experience, maybe? Either way, over the course of the next 8 days, productivity at Halfbrick Studios plummeted.
It started as just a game prototype, but it very quickly took over the office.
The game was intended to be played at people's off hours, like you have a few moments, why not go down and check the board? It ended up just being that people were playing the game constantly and doing work in the moments where things weren't happening. So that kind of got a little much.
Playing the game in this context doesn't just mean being in the boardroom and interacting with the prototype. That's like saying you're only playing chess when your hands are physically moving the pieces. No, Tank Tactics was happening everywhere, all of the time. A few days into the campaign, the designers sent out anonymous surveys to the players and discovered that 39% of them were discussing the game between 3 and 10 times per day. 18% talked about it more than 11 times every single day. And chances are, if you weren't plotting with other players, they were plotting against you.
We'd made this elaborate plan. I'd formed up with a whole load of people, and we'd spent a solid 10 minutes in the room discussing the logistics and whether or not we had enough points to make the necessary sequence of moves and kills and everything like that. And so we were all in agreement. I handed my tokens to this person who just looked at me and said, "And now you're dead," and dropped the token into the box and just backstabbed me right there.
This is the floor plan for the area surrounding the boardroom itself, which you might remember had glass walls. A later investigation would reveal that at least 5 employees who weren't actually playing the game themselves had been feeding information to those who were. A number of them sat at these desks right here with clear sight lines of the game and anybody who was taking actions throughout the day.
People were literally bribing people who were near the room where Tank Turns was to let them know over Messenger when somebody was approaching the room.
What did they bribe them with?
Money.
There's one other gameplay mechanic I haven't mentioned yet called the jury, and Muscat admits that he lifted this from, well, one of the very best in the social deduction business.
The people to which you were so rude and terrible to before relegating them to the jury with the help of your alliance are going to decide your fate this evening.
In short, as players are eliminated from the game, they become jury members who, once per day, get to vote on which player they want to help out. If any player receives 3 votes from the jury, they're given an extra action point. Think about it, if you betray too many people, even if they're defeated, they're going to hold that grudge against you into the afterlife, and suddenly your new opponents that you encounter later on are the ones getting additional actions. But like almost everything in this game, it led to a whole new set of problems as well. Over the last few weeks, I've been playing a game of Neptune's Pride, which is a web-based strategy game that looks like this and is actually one of the direct inspirations behind Tank Tactics. Although this one's set in space and has things like warp gates and industry and research, the core concept is really similar. You have to work with other players over the course of multiple weeks, and the whole time you're sending each other messages on here, but eventually you have to betray one another because only one player can ever win, and in this game that I'm playing with total strangers on the internet, those betrayals have hurt. At one point, a player sent a message to the whole group saying "Don't trust Light Blue," which prompted this huge back and forth about who had made what assurances and who was actually the more honest player out of the 2 of them. I later betrayed Light Blue myself, who then messaged me saying "Attacking me is pretty shitty." thanks, and then went on to tell me about some of the health issues they were facing in real life, which of course made me feel like a complete bastard as a result. Now imagine writing or receiving a message just like that, except it's about Alan from the accounting department down the hall, or someone you're working with on a joint project. There was an email thread going around throughout Tank Tactics involving all of its players, in which, amongst other things, grievances would be shared about certain co-workers' actions. Sometimes this might be a light-hearted attempt to sway the jury, but at others, it was more about venting frustration. And remember, this game is all about trust, so think about what that might do to a workplace. If, someone is saying, "Don't trust Alan from accounting, he's a liar." Certain emails were even being sent anonymously, and that's when things really started to get out of hand.
The one I remember is I believe there was a betrayal, and it was between two people who were very close friends, and I guess one of them saw it more as a game, and the other one saw it as a personal betrayal of friendship and of intrapersonal trust.
Big personalities in the mix, and I mean, kind of frankly as well, different levels of seniority inside the teams, and like people who have direct reports who are part of the game, and just it was definitely very messy and fraught at that stage.
And so after 8 days of play, the decision was made to stop the game. By now, a few players had come forwards to Muscat in person and said, "This game is affecting my relationship with other people here, and it's changing how I feel about work." 2 players had even stopped talking to one another entirely and would struggle to repair that relationship even in the months following Tank Tactics having been a thing.
It essentially just started to erode that confidence that everyone had, that in a really good team, you want to know that everyone has your back and that you're all on the same side and you're pulling towards the same objective. Meanwhile, for 2 hours a day, you have this experience playing out that is telling you the opposite of that. It's like, these people don't have my back. They're not on the same side. They don't, they're not here to kind of champion me. And to the point that I'm starting to feel very personally attacked.
Now, if you've not played a game like this before, there's a chance you're sitting there thinking, wait, really? People got that upset about a game that looks like this? And I hear you, I do, but as someone that's sunk days, sometimes weeks into similar games, I can totally believe it. About 6 years ago, I played a game called Subterfuge, not with strangers, but with some friends, including People Make Games' very own Quinton Smith. And not only did I betray him, I printed t-shirts for me and the other player who did him in that included the words, "Be nice, be in an alliance, fuck Quins." I'm not sure I knew Quins well enough to print those t-shirts. And even in this most recent game of Neptune's Pride that I've been playing, which, by the way, I filmed a video diary for that's available right now to People Make Games patrons at any tier. Seriously, you can chuck us a couple of quid and watch it right after this if you like. Even in that game, I found myself stressed out and at times genuinely emotionally drained by the interactions I'm having with total strangers.
England have just played in the Euros, but I need to, and I've had 4 beers, but I need to check on Neptune's Pride just in case anything's happened.
There are a number of things that Tank Tactics, Subterfuge and Neptune's Pride all have in common, but aside from the obvious need for diplomacy and betrayal, it's the huge time sink that really alters the relationships that players form with both the game and with one another. I've been thinking about Neptune's Pride for the last 2 weeks straight. It is almost always the first thing I think about when I wake up or when my mind starts to drift just a little, and honestly, there have been days when that has felt unhealthy for me. It's also been extremely memorable and unlike almost any other game I've ever played, but there's no way I'll be doing it again for at least a few years. Quite frankly, I don't want to. The idea of something like that intruding into an office where I'm working and the politics of the game needing to play off the very real life relationships I have, good and bad, with the colleagues that I'm playing with, oof, that feels dangerous.
Now, not at the time when I was making it, but now I really hate those kinds of games. Like all of the like social deduction board games are my absolute least favorite kinds of board games to play, like Secret Hitler and The Thing and all of that. They just, something about them, like I just get so anxious, I get this knot in my stomach. I would much rather stuff that is kind of bound by strong rules and not like because this person doesn't believe that I'm not a liar, it dramatically changes the course of the game. Like I like the strategizing to play directly off the rules rather than play off the people. So yeah, now I really don't like those kinds of games. So yeah, there's no part of me that like strongly regrets that game not existing.
Thank you so much for watching, and again, if you'd like to support our work and perhaps watch me get really quite involved into a game of Neptune's Pride over the course of a couple of weeks, head over to patreon.com/peoplemakegames. Thanks. But I do feel a bit bad about that. In Neptune's Pride, there's no real need to declare war, but I think it's the right thing to do. And in this case, because I feel bad about it, I've decided to do so using old-timey paper, just to add a bit of class, you know? Get a snap of that.